And we are good to go.
Welcome to the February 17th, 2022 meeting for the Edina Transportation Commission. I have a message to read provided by the city before we begin our meeting. Due to the surge in local COVID-19 cases, this meeting is being held electronically to ensure safety of residents and staff. All members of the commission and staff are participating virtually. For members of the commission, please remember mute your microphone when you're not speaking. We will have roll calls for each motion this evening, as well as for adjournment. I will ask Staff Liaison Andrew Scipione to call roll after each motion. Before we begin, there are a few things I'd like to cover for those listening or watching online. The public has two ways to view the meeting. They can watch live stream on the city's YouTube channel or listen via phone using the WebEx call-in number. There is no community comment during the meeting tonight. The city is committed to hearing and receiving your input on matters. The public can send in comments to the commission through the commission correspondence web form on our website. The recording of the meeting will also be available to watch on the city's website tomorrow. Go to watch a meeting link under the I Want to tab on the homepage. Thanks to everyone for tuning in tonight and for your interest in the Transportation Commission and work in our city. And with that, I will now call the meeting to order for our February 17th, 2022 meeting. And if you'd like to do the roll call, Andrew, we're ready to go.
Commissioner Aller.
Here.
Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Commissioner Kane. Commissioner Katui.
Here.
Commissioner Lewis.
Here.
Commissioner McCarthy. Commissioner Plum-Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Richmond.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Clark. Commissioner Conti Mahanti. Chair Johnson.
Here. Great, thank you. And next one is Andrew, do you want to share your screen if you're not already?
There we go.
Okay, and this would be agenda for tonight's meeting. Does anybody have any discussion about the agenda or any changes to suggest? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve as is?
So moved. Second.
Second.
Great, and I believe we go to roll call for that.
Commissioner Aller.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Katui.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Lewis.
Aye.
Commissioner Plum-Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond.
Aye.
Chair Johnson.
Aye.
Agenda is approved.
Great, and next, looking at last month's meeting notes, January, I believe it was the 25th. Would you be able to show those two, Andrew? January 20th. Oh, is the year wrong on there, Andrew?
Oh, yes, it is. It is wrong on there. Thank you.
So that's one thing to change. Is there any discussion on last month's meeting notes? Anybody? Hearing none, a motion to approve as is with the correction of the year.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Aller.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Katui,
Aye.
Commissioner Lewis,
Aye.
Commissioner Plum-Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
Aye.
Chair Johnson.
Thank you, Andrew.
The minutes are approved.
Excellent. So next on the agenda is special recognitions and presentations. Andrew has put together micromobility education part 1.
Oops. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So the purpose of this presentation is to partially fulfill the Commission's request during the work plan development for education on micromobility. Tonight, I'm going to be focusing on the City of Edina's recent venture into shared mobility services. At a future meeting, I'm trying to secure a guest speaker from an agency that still has shared mobility, so that they can talk more about current trends and maybe answer other questions that the Commission has. So again, today I'm only going to be focusing on Edina's past experiences. So our pilot program started in 2018, June of 2018. We signed an MOU, or a memorandum of understanding, with Lime. They deployed bikes in the end of July and then scooters in the end of September. And then all of the devices were collected by mid-November. So we had a pretty brief period of time for observation. This slide here shows the use data. A key takeaway that we had from this is that the scooter use far exceeded the bikes, even though they were only deployed for half the time. We saw 3 times as many trips in half the time. So given that limited observation window, staff recommended that we continue the pilot program into 2019. At the same time, kind of among the industry, there was a rising popularity of the scooters versus the bikes, which led to the industry to shift away from the dockless bike sharing. So we renewed our MOU with Lime for 2019, but at that time, Lime expressed that they were only planning to deploy the scooters in Edina, not the bikes. Whoops. So in 2019, scooters were deployed in mid-June. We saw a large spike in use compared to 2018. 2,600 trips by the end of July compared to 1,800 trips for all of the previous year, with 3,100 trips in the month of August alone. With the longer period of deployment, we also received more complaints. It's difficult for us to give an exact number of how many big complaints we received, because they were received from, or they were sent to engineering, public works, admin, police, parks, many different departments. As a result of some of those complaints, one measure we took was to install a geofence over Centennial Lakes and the promenade, which is what this graphic on the right shows. That essentially restricted use of the scooters within that perimeter. All of the devices were collected by late October, and the MOU expired in March of the following year. This data here shows the usage for the 2-year period, broken down based on type of device. So we have bikes and scooters in 2018 and the scooters in 2019. Again, you can see the e-scooters are vastly more popular than the bikes. We saw hundreds of more trips per week with the scooters compared to the bikes. 3,400 unique users, and on average, the scooters were used for a longer period of time. The concerns that we received during this pilot program were generally grouped into one of 3 categories. Safety was a big one. Among the complaints that we received from residents and guests at our park facilities were concerns about failure to use protective headgear, failure to yield to pedestrians, failure to obey traffic laws, reports of underage users, and reports of obstruction to the pedestrian walkways. The usage we saw was primarily recreational. It was particularly prevalent along the 9 Mile Creek Regional Trail, Centennial Lakes, and the promenade, which again is one of the reasons why we later in the year put a geofence over Centennial Lakes and the promenade. And anecdotally, they seem to be used as more of a novelty than the intent of being a transportation method or alternative. And then aesthetics. We saw residents that, or we heard from residents who just didn't like seeing these devices in their neighborhoods, even if they were parked legally. With many residents referring to the devices as litter. Another concern that we kind of realized is that we lack the bicycle infrastructure that some larger cities like St. Paul and Minneapolis have. Bike facilities are necessary because per state law, these e-scooters are only allowed to operate on bike facilities. They're not allowed to operate on sidewalks. However, many users who desire being separated from motor vehicle traffic choose to ride on the sidewalks because that's where they feel more comfortable. You can see these maps here comparing our bicycle facility network, which is sparse and has some significant gaps in it, compared to the heat map for usage in 2018. You can see, for example, a lot of use in the Southdale area, Park Lawn, along the 9 Mile Creek Regional Trail, and Pamela Park. Going into aesthetics, about 70% of the complaints that Lime received were related to parking. Of those, about half of them are what they call founded complaints, which means the vehicle is parked in a manner that violates the terms of the MOU. This includes, like you can see in the pictures here, obstructing a sidewalk or blocking access to a building. The other half of them were unfounded complaints or complaints that don't violate the terms of the MOU. So some examples are the pictures on the right, where, for example, they're parked near a sidewalk or they're parked in a boulevard and they're not blocking pedestrian access. Again, the nature of these complaints indicated to staff that many residents simply didn't like seeing these devices in their streets or in their neighborhoods. So in January of 2020, Council approved staff recommendation to discontinue the authorization of the bike and scooter sharing services for the reasons that I mentioned before. At the same time, we recognize that these types of services are going to, and in fact are continuing in neighboring cities such as Minneapolis and St. Louis Park. And so it's important that we continue to make measures to make us more able to host these types of services in the future. So some of the things that we're doing to hopefully get us in better shape to host these types of services in the future include, we continue to monitor administrative and regulatory practices. I have regular meetings with my colleagues in neighboring cities in the metro to learn more about the services they're using and the relationships that they're having with their different vendors. We continue to monitor regional and national trends in shared mobility. And we continue to implement bicycle infrastructure as recommended in the Ped and Bike Plan, because again, that infrastructure is crucial to being able to successfully operate a service like this. And that's all I have for now. That's my brief overview. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, I raised my hand, but I don't know if that actually gets seen by anybody. So my little hand is waving up on my screen. But I have two questions. One is the point on the slide that the shared use micromobility, I don't know what you call them, vehicles or instruments of micromobility, were being used largely for recreation, and therefore they were in this, Southdale, Pamela, and so on. Seems like it's in conflict with residents not liking to see them parked in their neighborhoods, which would tell me that actually they're being used for transportation when they go into the neighborhoods. So do you have thoughts about that inconsistency? That's question one. And then the second part is, I think, so so I think what you have presented is about the shared use micromobility, but not necessarily about overall micromobility. And I know that you're looking for a speaker to come in and talk to us about maybe overall micromobility. But I do see an increase in individual owners using, I'll call them vehicles of micromobility. I don't know what else to call them. You know, the hoverboards and the scooters and things like that. And so, so it seems to me that there's again a bit of inconsistency about what we need to do, maybe in the way of infrastructure that is separate from the shared use micromobility issue. And then the only other point that I wanted to add is that it seems to me that there may be some populations in Edina that would like to use them as transportation. And when they're, and I'm not disagreeing with the decision to block it with the geofence in the Centennial Lakes area. But if they were going to be used as transportation by somebody who lived, let's say, on the west side of France in some of those units over there, for them to get to the bus hub or whatever at Southdale, they would go through that. So anyway, there is something that there for us about who would be using them as transportation and how we might facilitate the use of those, whether they're shared or privately owned or whatever. And now I will mute my microphone.
Sure. I appreciate the comments and the questions. I'll try to answer them as I remember them. If I forget anything, feel free to let me know. But you're right that there definitely were some users that did use them for legitimate alternative transportation, as evidenced by the fact that these devices are largely deployed in our more commercial areas like 50th and France and Southdale. And so in order for them to end up in these residential neighborhoods, obviously someone had to take them there. But by and large, the use we saw was internal to those high density areas, to Southdale, to Centennial Lakes. So the fact that they were, someone was picking up a scooter in Centennial Lakes, driving it around a little bit, and then dropped it off back at Centennial Lakes or back in the promenade. Those are the kind of things that indicate to us that it was not someone using it to go from A to B. It was someone that was using it as for, recreation.
So Andrew, do we know that? I mean, so if somebody, like I said, if somebody were to get off the bus at the bus stop at Southdale and take a shared use micromobility scooter or bike over to, by it's not the Dayton's Home Store anymore, Macy's, whatever that is, and then leave it there because then now they're just going to cross France and walk to their apartment. That would be transportation, but it would still be totally contained in that Centennial Lakes area. So do we know that it's all recreation?
We don't have that specific data.
Okay.
Trying to recall what your other questions were. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
That's okay. We can give the floor to other people who have comments and questions.
Good question, but I do echo the points made about maybe the anecdotalness of the data and perhaps that there was a use. I did notice on the map, for example, like Xerxes was standing out to me, so like there could have been some first last mile connections to destinations that maybe were external to recreational uses. So I do want to highlight that I just want to make sure that the anecdotes are factually based if we do want to ever introduce these into the city again, if there are opportunities. And I think that, I worked in micromobility in Denver and there was a lot of issues, especially with the rollouts, but I think there's also been a lot of positive attributes that have been identified for micromobility, shared use micromobility specifically, since that's what we're talking about today. So echoing that, my one question was, with cost share, did the city explore any annual fee or per ride cost sharing with Lime as a way to make some money off of the venture and also perhaps implement the network of bicycle infrastructure to support the use?
Good question. No, that wasn't something that we explored as part of this pilot program.
Okay.
Lori, I remembered one of your questions was oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Chris.
I was just going to ask really quick, does St. Louis Park or Minneapolis or other communities do that to your knowledge?
They do. Yep, they have fee structures in place for their vendors.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Lori, I recall you had a question about or a comment about the geofence in Centennial Lakes and how that may impact someone who's traveling through. That's a good comment, but the geofence is intended to is mostly intended to prevent someone from leaving a scooter in that place. So someone who could still, in theory, travel through a geofence, as long as they don't leave the scooter within the boundary, they can travel through it without any problem.
Okay, great, thanks.
Does anybody else have some comments or questions for Andrew on this first part?
Yeah, I have a question. I can't remember if there was a fee associated with joining the program, or even if there was a requirement for credit card to use them, even if there wasn't a fee.
For the users?
Yeah, for the users.
Yeah,
just don't remember.
It was slightly different for the bikes than the scooters. If I remember right, it was about $1 per ride, something like that. And it varies a little bit too, depending on how long you have the device. But I think it's like $1 to unlock it, and then there's like an hourly fee after that.
And did it also, I know some ride shares or some of these kinds of share services charge a deposit amount onto a credit card, which they credit back later, but that sometimes is a barrier to entry. I don't remember if that was true with this.
In my experience, no, because admittedly, when we had them, I downloaded the app and I used them a couple times, and I didn't have to pay any kind of deposit.
It's interesting to come back to it. I do remember anecdotally all of the complaints about seeing the scooters. But I also see there's like new opportunities when the light rail comes in that wasn't there, that would really change the landscape of their potential for use as transportation, that may not have, maybe there weren't enough places for people to use them for transport when we had the pilot project.
Or the E-line too, the future.
Yeah. And we weren't now we're intentionally encouraging businesses to try and encourage their employees to use public transportation, which we weren't doing before. So, and I also don't know how much we had, public education about them, about why we would choose to implement this. There are definitely things to learn from this, like we need to have a good public education campaign if we would roll something like this out again, that highlights their use as transportation, that might encourage people to consider using them that way, or surveys of certain areas of the city that we see might potentially be users, to find out if they think they would really use it as opportunities before we might do something like this again.
Yeah, those are great points.
Maybe a comment and jumping off on that point, and then a question for you, Andrew. Something related to one of our work plans is we were faced with potentially diminished transit options in the short to medium term. I'll provide an update on that a little bit in the work plan update, but I think it's worth noting that this is a thing that we may want to consider in a different manner to fill in gaps that are being either temporarily or permanently vacated from a public transit perspective. If some of the service that used to serve the community doesn't come back or doesn't come back in the same way, I think we would need to consider, if we're committed to, non-vehicle transport options, and a bus route doesn't come back or doesn't come back in the same way, this could be a thing we need to reconsider in a different framing than what it looked like 3 years ago. So that would be one comment, and then a question, not being around in this capacity when this rolled out. Do you recall, Andrew, any commentary from council in terms of their perspective on the ridership numbers? I found those compelling here, but I hear us talking about sort of an outsized discussion about the aesthetic concerns. So I just wanted to see if you recall any history of like, was there a consideration of the value in terms of miles traveled, vehicle miles offset, things of that nature relative to the aesthetic concerns?
Thanks for the question and the comment. I don't recall a lot of comment or really any comment from council on that point. At the time, really the only strong comparison that we had was to the city of Minneapolis in terms of comparing, users per capita or trips per capita. And it's, that comparison by itself is a little skewed. Again, just the nature of the two cities and the infrastructure that Minneapolis has to support them. But I mean, by that comparison, Minneapolis in 2018 saw like 0.5 trips per capita, whereas we saw like 0.14 trips per capita. So it was, dramatically lower than what we saw in Minneapolis around the same time.
I've got one other, avenue to pursue with this. I noticed that you didn't put any comment in your show about the vendor. You named them, but you didn't identify any, service issues or nothing about the service. And I do know that I think there maybe was some difficulty in utilizing at least some of the bikes. I remember, and I'm not sure if it was you or your predecessor, Mark Nolan, who tried to bring, when we had open streets, tried to bring a couple of nice ride bikes. Was that you?
No, that was Mark. And
That was Mark. Yeah.
I don't remember if they were nice or if they were lime, but.
Yeah, no, they weren't nice. They were lime because we can't have nice ride bikes, because they were in Minneapolis. And he tried to bring two of them. One was broken, and the other one, even though he put in all his information, screamed at him that it was going to call the police. So it's I think there were some issues with the equipment itself, and then also the servicing of them that maybe made this a little bit problematic, or at least certainly made it more difficult for some populations.
Sure. I didn't. My recollection working with Lime was that they were fairly responsive to complaints. I mean the founded complaints, the legitimate complaints about vehicles parked inappropriately. Maybe not to the level that some of our residents may have wished, where they'd go out, immediately and move a scooter or redeploy it somewhere. But I felt like they responded in a relatively timely manner to those types of issues.
But what about equipment? It was again, totally anecdotally, one point of reference, but it was like the two bikes he could find, one was broken and one wouldn't let him use it. So it just made me wonder about the maintenance on them. And I'm just not sure.
I've never received any complaints about machines that didn't work. I know Lime said, I think about 10% of their complaints over the 2-year period were related to either broken or otherwise inoperable machines.
Okay.
So relatively low amount.
Okay. Mindy, you remember that?
Well, what I remember was at the end of the time period that there was one of their bikes parked outside of City Hall that 2 or 3 of us reported on through their app for them to pick up, and it took them a very long time to come pick it up. It was even beyond the time period that all the rest of them had been collected, and that it was just so glaringly obvious that it happened to be parked outside of City Hall.
I remember that too.
Yeah. I had one other question too. I do recall that one of the complaints that we heard a lot was about the scooters being used in the street, which of course is what the law is, that they're not allowed on sidewalks. And I'm wondering if there's been, I remember thinking at the time we were a little bit ahead of any state statutes that might guide their use. And then I'm thinking ahead of if we were to do something like this again, it would be very likely that that e-bikes would probably be included in a mix like they are in other bike share programs now. Have the law, do you know of any changes in like state statutes that might now be giving more guidance, or in neighboring municipalities that may have added any statutes?
As far as I know, our nearby municipalities are still operating under the same state statute. Minneapolis, for example, they explicitly say on their website they're not from use on sidewalks, and they've gone to pretty significant lengths to make sure that their bike infrastructure is also able to accommodate the scooter use. And they've even gone so far as to take some handful of their parking spaces, like on-street parking throughout the city, and convert it to scooter parking, just to further emphasize the fact that the scooters are meant for the street or for the bike facilities, not for the sidewalk.
Thank you.
I have a couple comments and questions, but I want to see if Jill or Janet had anything before I go.
No, none for me. Thank you.
I don't have any either.
Okay. I was just wondering, or more of a thought for if we roll out something again, either pilot or another program to roll out, to think ahead of time. Like Andrew, you mentioned the different kinds of complaints came in different venues and it was hard to collect. And so it would seem like somebody in the city could think about a centralized database where no matter where it came through, like pulleys or other avenues, could be collected centrally, and that would give perhaps better data. So as a comment, also, I didn't see or hear anything about what might be a measure of success, like a program like this, if it's about trip usage or safety or certain kind of complaints limited to certain categories. Maybe that was done, or maybe it wasn't really relevant because it was just a pilot to learn from. But that, I think, is important to consider as part of other programs like this to try out. So those are my two comments. And the question I had is, have you heard, when you're talking with your colleagues, has the St. Louis Park experience been better or worse?
Thanks for the comments. I think those are good points. As far as measures of success, we really didn't have any during the pilot program. The intent of it was to allow the service to operate and see what happened, see what kind of use we got, what areas of the city they were popular in, and learn. In the future, some metrics that other agencies have used to kind of determine success is like how many trips per day each device has. That's useful in looking at what's the appropriate amount of devices to deploy to a city. Ideally the vendors want definitely more than one trip per day per unit. You want that unit to be used a couple times during the day. Another one is how many unique users we have, or just how many total trips are we experiencing. So those could be metrics that we look at in the future. As far as comparing St. Louis Park's experience to ours, anecdotally, from what I recall, I don't believe they had as many aesthetic concerns as we did. They also worked with two different vendors, with Lime and with Bird, I believe. And so they had some more, and they had a licensing program for their vendors. So I think they were able to work with the vendors a little bit more timely manner than we were, because they had that fee structure set up. But again, I'm hoping to bring in a guest speaker that can comment more on what other cities' experiences have been.
Thanks, Andrew, for putting all that together.
Sure. And I guess I'll add, if anyone has, before, I don't know when part 2 of this will be, but if anyone has any specific questions, either related to shared mobility or just micromobility in general, feel free to shoot them my way so I can try to get them covered in part 2 as best I can.
I noticed that Stephen has joined us since we started this conversation, and I'm always interested in the youth perspective. Especially we've been talking about, I don't know if you recall when we had the shared bikes and the shared scooters available in Edina.
Yeah, I recall that.
And do you have any thoughts about, from your perspective, or friends you knew that may or may not have used them?
I find the shared bike paths and like the shared pedestrian paths are kind of useful because they're large enough that like friends could come in and bike with each other, and it's also quite nice for use, and it just feels more like integrated into the road as well and into like the neighborhood.
And we had the Lime scooters and bikes that were available that people could use.
Yeah, those are nice. I like it for like public transport, and I find that it's accessible for many people, and it's also it provides access to at least a little bit faster transport than walking around, and it's also a little bit fun along the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, and thanks for joining us, Stephen. I'm glad Mindy noticed. I didn't see that, so thanks for joining us. I think that
You're welcome.
we're ready to move on. And I like Andrew's invitation. If you think of something you'd like included in part 2, to definitely send that to Andrew. So I think the traffic safety report is next. Is that right?
Yes, it is. I'll share my screen here.
Thank you.
So we'll get my notes out of the way. So the first item, A1, we have is request for crosswalk markings at 58th and Wooddale. You can see the ADT for those streets listed there. Both of them are collectors. 58th Street has the new sidewalk on the north and south side to the east of the intersection, and a sidewalk on the north side. That's wrong. It should be on the north side. Wait. Yeah, 58th Street has a sidewalk on the north side, west of the intersection, and on the north and south side, east of the intersection. Wooddale just has a sidewalk on the east side, north and south. It's always stop control. Concord Elementary and Southview Middle School are half a mile to the west. Pamela Park is a third of a mile to the east. Along Wooddale, we have existing marked crossings at 56th, at Woodland, 59th, and 60th Streets. When we observed crossings, we found 161 over Wooddale, the peak of 49, and then over 58th, 136 with a peak hour of 36. At this time, staff is recommending to install the crossings over Wooddale Avenue, so crosswalk marking to connect the sidewalks on 58th Street. And we're going to do some further studying of the crossings on Wooddale to determine if crosswalk markings are warranted along or over 58th Street.
Any questions?
Comment I think makes a lot of sense, especially with the work done on the sidewalks on the east side on 58th. Lots of people cross there, and we built the sidewalk infrastructure. We should do the crossing piece. I'd also add to, I do think it may seem duplicative to have 59th and 60th, but I can speak from experience. I do think those are also used pretty significantly, especially in transit to Pamela Park. So just in the event that is noted there as sort of crosswalk overload or sign overload, I do think that they're distinct, and it's valuable and necessary to have them at the subsequent streets to the south, even if it seems like there's a lot.
I would agree with Andy, and that particular intersection, you know, it's a major route to schools. There are a lot of people in the neighborhoods that walk. And the problem is if you don't also put them over 58th, where will people cross to get to the other side? If, you know, because if they come from the middle school, then they're on the north side. And then, but if they live on the south side, where will they cross? Because, you know, they have to go all the way down to the park for a crosswalk, then across 58th. So it makes sense to me that there would be crosswalks across all four of those of the roads. And
Andrew, oh, sorry.
good plan.
I'm also in agreement in part because I think Wooddale is an avenue used to avoid France.
Mhm.
And so there's speeding cars, there's a lot of traffic.
Yep. Right.
It's France light at this point. That's what I would call it.
I've talked to some neighbors in that area, and they have commented that in the last few years, the honking and tailgating has been worse. And so I hope these things will provide more safety. And quick question though, is it true there is a crosswalk on 59th? Because I don't remember that.
To my knowledge, there is all four of those crosswalks, 56, Wooddale or Woodland, 59th and 60th, were the result of traffic safety requests. The 59th
Sure
Street.
it's 60th. I'm less certain, but pretty sure on 59th.
If it's not in right now, I believe it should be in soon. I know it was
that's
an
the one.
item that was approved.
Yeah, that's the one where we moved the bus stop to the corner instead of in the middle of the block. And after the bus stop was finished, then there was going to be a crosswalk added.
Right.
Okay, so if it's not now, it'll be soon, like when the snow melts.
Fingers crossed.
Mm. Yeah, this one looks good. Should we move on?
All right. Next item is B1. This is a request to increase the visibility with the RFBs at Eden Avenue on 50th. So residents requesting advance warning signs for the rectangular rapid flashing beacons. They do already have advanced warning signs. The eastbound has a sign 350 feet before. The westbound has a warning sign 250 feet before. A 24-hour study of crossings showed 20 total crossings in the day. And in the last 10 years, we only have one reported crash in this segment, which involved 2 eastbound vehicles. So because there's existing warning signs in place, staff recommends no changes other than continuing to monitor vegetation overgrowth in the summer months to make sure that both the RFBs themselves and the advanced warning signs remain visible.
Is it just me, or does Andrew fade out from time to time?
Fade us out some time to time.
Okay, all right.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's like you
Feedback.
get very, very quiet, but it doesn't look like you're changing what you're doing. So
We'll blame the internet.
Might be my headset too.
Okay. Any comments on that one?
The comment I had is for my job, we recently proposed an enhanced crossing, Andrew, and used LED flashing lights on the advanced warning signage that was Wi-Fi connected to the RFBs to provide enhanced illumination of when they were going. And since there is maybe some sight distance issues here, that could be a future consideration if the foliage isn't the only issue. And there's also the curves and the topography changes. So just putting it out there as another idea.
Sure.
Two.
B2. This is a repeat of one we received, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, maybe longer than that. But a request for a crosswalk over Hazelton Road between the entrances of Target and Yorktown Center. Hazleton has about 8,000 vehicles per day. It's 50 feet wide with 4 lanes. There's a marked crossing to the west, about 530 feet to the west at the promenade. And that crossing has the overhead hawk beacon, as well as a crossing 500 feet to the east at the York Avenue traffic signal. There's been 1 crash reported in this segment in the last 10 years. We observed over 24 hours, we observed 112 crossings at this location with 14 during the peak hour, which do not meet our current crosswalk warrants. So at this time, we recommend no change. We are considering safety improvements as part of potential future project. There's been some preliminary talk about a road diet on Hazleton to convert this section from a 4-lane to a 3-lane section. As part of that project, we may consider some crossing treatments for there to help narrow that crossing and make it safer.
Programmed at all to match the cross section west of the promenade? Like, is it? I guess 2 questions. Would it look? Is it planned maybe to look like that? I'm assuming to continue the 3-lane section, and then 2, is that in the CIP in the near future, or is it still just a long-term project?
It's not in the CIP right now. It's related to a potential sanitary sewer expansion along the street that we're looking at. That project, I believe, is in the CIP, although I can't remember what year. So at this point, we don't have an idea of what that section would look like. We just kind of have it in the back of our minds as if we're going to be tearing up the street, it might be a good opportunity to implement a road diet.
If I'm thinking of the right area, it's where you come into or go out of Target, and then right across from that is the entrance to Yorktown. Is that correct, or whatever that is?
Yep, that's correct.
That is a terrible section of road for anybody who drives there, much less walks there. I wouldn't want to put a crosswalk there because I don't feel safe turning into or out of Target or Yorktown there. So I completely, I'm glad that you're not going to, at this point, put a crosswalk there. And I get that people have to go out of their way to walk up to the crosswalk. But until the road is fixed, that just doesn't strike me as a practical place to put a crosswalk. It's an awful place.
I actually am going to say it's a safety issue because I'm right in that neighborhood. And even when you just consider the demographics around there, the Yorktown, there's Yorktown place is kind of elderly population. So I would suggest a safety crossing walk because there are people who are crossing those 4 lanes. So on one hand, when I say we want to reduce it to 2 lanes, so it's a short amount, it makes sense because I try to cross it, and sometimes when someone is pushing a cart or in a scooter or some assistance for walking through or use walker, or so it's a long walk. So I think a crosswalk would be very nice. So, and it will be both ways, crossing on York, going on to Target or the strip mall there in Yorktown, or crossing from Yorktown going to there. So it will be both directions or 4 ways.
Sure. Thanks for the comments. Anything else on B2? Hearing none. Any comments on any of the D items?
For letter D6, I think we also at the last meeting included 58th in France along with that group. Maybe that's being handled separately, but I was just remembered it right now. Do you recall, Andrew?
Yes, I do. I do recall the commission brought that up, and I have not heard back from the county on that. So I will follow up.
Anybody else? D, letter Ds? If not, we will move on to work plans. So number one, boulevard tree policy. I know
Awesome.
there's been some activity. Lori.
Yep, Jill and I have met, and we've agreed on an approach to this. And what I'll say is that I think the thing that has concerned me from the start about this is that we can work on whatever we want to work on for the boulevard trees, but there's a bigger issue about trees in Edina, and so to that, to the extent that there are trees that are on private property with development happening, there are trees on the public lands of parks. Other commissions, I think, need to be involved in this. And so Jill and I have reached out to the Planning Commission, the Parks Commission, and the Energy and Environment Commission. And we are putting together a small group to discuss sort of an umbrella approach to what we want to do to not just, for step one, protect, but then long-term also maintain and develop trees in the canopy in Edina. So we're doing that. We also met with the city forester and kind of got an earful about the fact that he is one person and he doesn't have staff. And he can't, he is entirely, his full-time job right now is simply to remove diseased trees. He cannot take on anything more. So that's one of the topics that we will take to those other commissions to talk about, how do we develop ordinances to protect the trees we have, because that's probably step one, because we certainly can't add or maintain anything more because Luther really can't. So Jill, do you have anything else to add? That's where we are at the moment.
No, I think you covered it, but I'd just like to reiterate, with the current ordinance regarding trees, there isn't really one, and it's weak. It's easy for builders to have super cheap buyouts, and Luther is under the Parks and Recs funding, and funds can be reallocated in a heartbeat depending on what's going on, and so he's really underfunded. In my own personal opinion, I think he needs his own kind of zone if this is really going to work. But go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Well, as you continue, is part of the policy potentially, could that have a supplemental recommendation on adequate staffing? Maybe you were going there.
I think our first step is really to talk to just to get opinions of other commissions, because trees cover so many commissions. It's just best, I think, to get, like Laura was saying, just an overview of what they think first.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that I did have a conversation with Scott Neal about this, and he said, yes, go ahead and reach out to the other commissions. I think he thought I was going to do it by memo, but it seems the better part of wisdom to have a conversation about how do we approach this. Because if we simply, like, we go ahead and do something with boulevard trees, and then Energy and Environment does something that is consistent with the climate action plan, but isn't at all about boulevard trees, and then Parks either does or doesn't do anything based on the fact that there's no funding for staffing. It's like, I think we kind of need to put our heads together to figure out how we begin to move this forward in a way that also meets the city's needs for the allocation of resources.
Excellent.
I will say that it seemed evident to, I think, both Jill and I that that this area, if anything is to be done more as it relates to trees, more funding of staff and resources is going to be needed. But that said, not ours to say. So we'll see how it goes. We'll meet with the other commission folks. So we do have 2 folks from planning. I think we have 1 or 2 from Energy and Environment.
And still working on Parks I've already gotten some more information during this meeting, so I'll get in touch with Laura.
Good work.
That's the plan.
Thank you.
Have you
Thank you.
also thought about reaching out to the Community Health Commission? Because as I recall, they were another group that had trees on their work plan way back when multiple of us had them on the work plan. Or at
I
least
had not.
I remember them talking about
That's good.
the health and wellness benefits of more trees.
So I think what we're trying to do is consider who of the commissions might tie into the development of ordinances. And I think, you know, the fact that it's a benefit, I mean, maybe we could talk about it offline. We didn't include them, but I'm not sure that they would tie into an ordinance more than they'd say, yes, it would be of benefit to us from a health standpoint.
Makes sense. And I do know that Luther has a grant to plant 1,000 trees in Edina next year.
He does, but when you actually break that down, and what he got was $100,000, I think, if I'm not mistaken. That's $1,000 a tree. That includes the planting, so it's not just the tree. Is that right, Jill? Is that what he said?
I thought it was $100.
That's what I thought too. It was $100 a tree. It's like, well, that's going to be a little stick. And you know, once he actually broke it down, it is nowhere near sufficient to actually do anything measurable.
No, he will be reliant on volunteers to help plant those trees because we've been talking
And the
about high
volunteer
school
programs
students
have
as part
been
of it.
stopped. You know, he mentioned that. And he has historically had volunteer programs, but during COVID, that's been a no-go. So he's alone, really. He's
alone. Yeah. So we will definitely keep his needs and the staffing needs in mind as we move forward with this. And we want to be sensitive to the fact that he is one guy doing a city's worth of trees. And you know, there's a lot going on with trees, with people taking them down and they shouldn't. And anyway, there's a lot going on. So we'll have something more for you next month. We don't know what.
Should we move on to Andy's?
Three small parts to my update. Where we left off last time, Andrew was kind enough to get me in touch with his contact at Metro Transit just to talk about where things stand in terms of current and future service in Edina. So I had a good conversation with him a couple of weeks ago. The conversation was good. The outcomes were not good, meaning the next round of transit changes in Edina just cut service further, which is not great. It's mostly representative of the driver shortage, but a little bit of ridership too. So related to my comments earlier on shared mobility, it feels like the reach of transit is only shrinking, and so we may have to consider some other options there. Just to briefly summarize those for the group, I think starting in end of March, the next time service changes take place, the Route 6 that runs on Wooddale every so often will be suspended indefinitely. A little bit of that will shift to increased frequency on France, and then frequency on the 515, which runs from Southdale to the airport or MOA, maybe both, will also go from 20 minutes to 30-minute frequency. So unfortunately, less service, not more. So that's one update. We'll have to take that into consideration, because I think in the context of how we incorporate this into development for the Planning Commission, you think about the development that's going on. For example, over here at Valley View and Wooddale, there's a tremendous amount of multifamily housing that's been built over here, and we are, at least for the time being, removing all transit service from where we just built all that housing. So some work to be done on that front. I do have a second meeting tomorrow with Deb Barber, who is a member of the Metropolitan Council. I had raised some of these questions about service cuts relative to employers likely calling employees back into the office, especially downtown and in the first ring suburbs. And if we are going to be changing transit service to meet those needs, certainly the case here in Edina, where the service has been cut back significantly, and she wanted to talk further about that concern and feedback. So I'm meeting with her tomorrow, and I'll share that back here. A little bit closer to the deliverable here, I've been in contact with a couple of folks from the Planning Commission. I have a small group of them who are interested in working and partnering with me on this. So my next step is to take some of this information that we've learned just about service, get together and start formalizing how we might want this checklist and set of work to look, and actually put that in front of the 2 or 3 folks who were named from the Planning Commission who are interested in it. So that's where it's at. That's where we'll go from here. I'll pause there for any questions.
Nice work.
Thank you.
Nice work, Andy. I'm just gonna make a comment. I don't have a question. I just recently got a job in Minneapolis, and I was very excited, looking forward to only taking up 1 bus in front of my building to work, and it's not there. I was very disappointed. Yeah. So.
Thank you, Andy. Number 3 is Chris's initiative for PACS fund policy.
Yes. No major updates, Andrew. I will get that meeting formalized, and then once I can sit down with you, we can kind of formulate next steps and data needs, and so more to come next month.
Thank you, Chris. Numbers 4 and 5, the SRTS demonstration projects and TIS process review. I don't have any info from Bill Card. I checked with Andrew, and he doesn't either. Does anybody else? So we can move on to number 6. Andy again.
Unmute. I do not have much of an update on this piece. This sort of, I think, following a little bit of the lead of the first one. So once I think we get some of the steps in place to start formalizing the first, potentially we might have to invest more in this one if transit service lags a little bit. So I'll have more of an update on this one too. And I think, Chris, I probably owe you a note on this one too, just to make sure that I'm lined up with your initiative.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to support this one. So just let me know.
Yeah.
Can you guys
I
hear?
noticed that the organized trash collection is still in the parking lot, and I'm just wondering, Andrew, are you going to report on that in the staff comments, where that's at?
Yeah, I could do that, or I could do it now. I have a quick update.
Let's do it now.
Sure. So the EEC met last week. They had at their January meeting, they had drafted an advisory communication, but they hadn't formally approved it. They were considering making some changes to it. Well, since the legal memo has now been provided, they decided not to adopt their advisory communication, since their advisory communication was mainly asking council to review the legal steps, the next legal steps they could take. The EEC also decided not to sign on to the ETC's advisory communication. So the ETC's advisory communication has been approved, and unless there are any changes or any additional comments from the commission, I'm planning to send that to council for their March 1st meeting for them to consider.
Does anybody have any changes or questions? We finished that last month.
Send it. Do you need a vote on this, or is that done? No. Okay, send it.
It's done. Yeah.
So there is no additional information from council on what they are planning to do?
Last I've heard from Scott, is that he's still trying to get in touch with council members to determine what they want for next steps. So I'm hoping that this advisory communication on their next meeting agenda will prompt that discussion to take place sooner rather than later.
Okay, and what date is that meeting?
March 1st.
Okay,
It's a week from Tuesday.
okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Great. So that finishes work plan updates and the parking lot.
So now we are on
Elections.
elections.
Andrew, you guide us through this, yes?
Sure. So chair and vice chair, those commissioners hold those positions for 1 year at a time starting in March. So which is why we're having elections in February. If there are multiple people who are interested in serving as chair or vice chair, I might suggest that the commission has some discussion first before considering making nominations. When a nomination is made, the person who's being nominated has to agree to be that position. So nobody can nominate Bruce to a position or Bokar, for example, because they're not here tonight. But after a nomination is made and seconded, then we proceed to a vote. And essentially, whoever is voted in for each position first is in that position. So the commission can do vice chair first or chair first. It doesn't really make a difference. We just need one person to serve in both. There are no term limits for vice chair. There is the chair can only serve 3 one-year terms, so Kirk is still eligible to continue on chair if he wishes and the commission wishes. Likewise, Jill can continue as vice chair if that's what you desire.
Well, I'll start this off if you don't mind. And, in the last year, I've just learned so much about the city, and I've enjoyed working with so many people. But I do believe one of my strengths is just kind of researching things and having kind of input on the side. And also within the last year, we've acquired some really big talent in the area of urban planning and transportation. And, I'd like to call out both Andy and Chris, and both are super talented. And I think they realize that the vice chair can take a little bit of time. And I've had quick communications with them, but I would really like to nominate Andy Lewis for vice chair. And I think the commission has done some really good work in the last few years. And I think that Andy would only strengthen the voice of the commission and, just keep us moving forward in the right direction. So how do you feel about that, Andy?
Can I jump in and
Thank you.
second the nomination?
Well, thank you for the kind words. This is commenting in this regard is somewhat uncomfortable for me, but I appreciate it and would certainly welcome the opportunity if nominated, and have appreciated my time with this group so far. I've learned a ton. Feel like I have a lot more to learn, and have welcomed the chance to connect this work with some of the other efforts that I do as well with the Met Council. So I'd certainly be interested and appreciative if given the opportunity.
Did I get that second in there?
I second.
I got your second, Lori.
Okay, just checking.
So we move to a roll call then?
Yeah,
Or
unless
are
there's
there
any other
other-
discussion.
Yes.
Going to roll call, Commissioner Aller.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Katui.
Aye.
Sorry, thank you. Commissioner Lewis,
Aye.
Commissioner Plum-Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
Aye.
Chair Johnson.
Aye.
We have a new vice chair. Congratulations.
Woo!
Yay.
Thank you.
I would
I
like to
appreciate
say
it.
thank you, Andy. And I would just like to say again, Jill has been a wonderful partner. And even though you might know her as the contact person for organized trash collection, Jill has filled in many, many behind the scenes activities, roles, bouncing ideas off, ad hoc meetings. And so, Jill, thank you for your talents.
Yeah.
And also, I remember your campaign speech included how you wanted to connect with other groups and you wanted to engage students. And I saw strong deliveries, both areas totally. So that is definitely your strength, and thank you for that.
Thank you, Kirk.
I agree. It's really a pleasure to work with you, Jill. And you're not off the hook because you're still, at least, you know,
We're on trees now.
we're on trees.
Trees.
Andy, I think you're a great selection for us for vice chair. I look forward to working with you in that role.
Thank you very much.
I
Yep,
would,
I want to add
before-
to, and Andy, you impress me because you walk all over and you know the city and you learn about it and you experience it in different ways. So yeah, it's a really good reminder for all of us to be experiencing the community the way we to have transportation and then talking to people. So thanks for that model you do.
are we open to nominations for chair? Because if so, I'd like to nominate Kirk Johnson for
I
chair
second.
for a second term.
Second.
Are you willing, Kirk?
You accept, Kirk?
Yes, I am willing to serve again. I learned a lot. I think I'm getting a little better at it, and I'm eager for succession for later. So if the group wants another year, I would be thrilled to serve in that way. And I'm also interested to support anybody else that is eager to do the role too.
He's great to work with, Andy. If you were ever flipping out, just call Kirk. He's very soothing, very logical.
We are both down the street neighbors from one another and former coworkers. So
Oh, nice.
neither things that we knew before joining the Transportation Commission in that capacity, but here we are. So I'll while I'm unmuted, I'll just put in a word for Kirk as well. I've appreciated your guidance and leadership in my time on the commission, and I appreciate keeping us in order and focused on the right stuff, but also allowing, I think, really healthy dialogue and debate too, which is part of why we're here. So yeah, my full support as well.
Thanks, Andy.
Other discussion? Otherwise, we can proceed to the vote. Commissioner Aller,
Aye.
Commissioner Brown,
Aye.
Commissioner Katui,
Aye.
Commissioner Lewis,
Aye.
Commissioner Plum-Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
Aye.
Chair Johnson.
Aye.
Have
Woot.
our chair.
Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Congratulations, Kirk and Andy.
We're all set up for 22. That's awesome.
Wow, did we just finish the last page? Then we move to member comments and staff comments. Yes, so chair and member comments is next.
So let's see. I'm just going to proceed alphabetically. Mindy.
First, I just want to also thank Kirk and Andy for taking on our leadership roles. Very much appreciated. And I actually have it might be more of a question, Andrew, for you. For some reason, as we've been driving more, we've had a lot more comments about whether when there are turn arrows, if they're flashing yellow at times when there's not much traffic. I haven't noticed them in many places in Edina. Even there's not even a whole lot of turn arrows where I usually drive in Edina. But the conversation has prompted that question of, do we have flashing yellows at non-peak times in Edina for turn arrows? And if not, is that something that can simply be implemented, or does that take some sort of change of policy in order to implement something like that?
The short answer is we do have some flashing yellow arrows, maybe like, I want to say like 2 or 3, but most of our signals don't have flashing yellow arrows. They do, my understanding is that they do take some effort to retrofit onto existing signals. And we do like to do some analysis of the turning count movements just to make sure that they're justified. Most of our signals are operated by Hennepin County. So we would work with them they do have a program to install flashing yellow arrows, but it generally involves the city committing funding to pay for the installation and maintenance of them. So I'd say over the next few years, you'll probably slowly see some signals turn to flashing yellow arrow as they come up for replacement. But right now we don't have kind of a strategic program to convert them to flashing yellow.
And if a resident were to notice a place where they think one would be appropriate, how do we go about submitting a request or a recommendation for an intersection to be considered?
They could either submit a traffic safety request, or they could just contact me directly, and I can see what data we have, and maybe if it's if the county is looking at it in the near future or things like that.
All right, now that I understand that, I'll be watching more carefully where we do and don't have them and look for opportunities. Thank you. That's all I have.
Chris?
Yeah, I just wanted to share my excitement and echo other comments again for Kirk and Andy, and just share that my appreciation for both of you stepping up. And I feel like each meeting we're getting a lot done. There's a lot of excitement with this commission, a lot of good work from all members, and so just feeling the excitement and appreciation for everyone and everyone's hard work.
Janet?
Thank you, Jill, for serving as vice chair. And I'm so excited you're still with us. And Andy, definitely congratulations on taking the helm and leading us. And Kat, you've been wonderful in leading us all the time. So when I'm out, I'm calling you. Obviously, do I get the link? And you've been gracious about responding to me. So thank you. And thank you to all commissioners on here. So I look forward to our work this year. That's it.
Andy?
Only comment I have besides, again, just thanking everybody for their support. I'm excited is if anybody has feedback you'd like to share with me to then share back to any of the various folks that I'm talking with at Met Council and Metro Transit, feel free to email me or call or otherwise communicate with me on that front. I don't want to assume that my personal perspective around where we should have service or how quickly we should expand it or not, that my view is representative of all. So just put a request out there, any feedback you have or any input you'd like me to share, questions you'd like me to ask. I think it'll just make for a richer conversation, but that's all from my side.
Bill?
My comments are just looking forward to another great productive year. Very much looking forward to working with Lori on trees. And if there's anything I can support Andy and Kirk with, just let me know.
Lori?
I'll just add my congratulations to Kirk and Andy. You guys are going to be a great leadership team, and echo the thanks to you, Jill. You have been a leader in many ways, some behind the scenes and some right out front, and it's been great to work with you in that capacity. I look forward to this capacity. My only comments are really about the sidewalks. I know we talked about that last month, that some of them are, I mean, it takes a long time to get them plowed, but also the plowing job is, I don't know if it's the equipment or the or the operator, but they're pretty poorly done. Lots of ice, and I get that ice is harder, but you know that's because there's lots of snow that's left on them, and then eventually it melts and then it refreezes. This is a terrible time of the year for pedestrians, and so if there's anything that can be done to improve the plowing, but then maybe sand on some of the sidewalks, and I'm talking specifically about down France and also both sides down 58th, on both sides of France. But I'm sure that there are others. And it's been a strange weather year, but I think it's going to continue to be strange weather where we get ice buildup and, you know, crunchy snow and all that. So if they're not cleared right away, then they become a mess. And I kind of think that's the way of it. So I think the city might have to figure out some strategies to make those passable. They certainly would not be passable by a wheelchair if somebody were to be using that on the sidewalks. So I'm concerned about our pedestrian ways. And that's all I have.
I'll second that too. I know I had to leave before I could make that comment. I think Kirk was kind enough to make that on my behalf last month, but it's not consistent for what it's worth. There are places that it's done really well, but then there are others where it is quite poor. And the one that comes to mind is the stretch over here of Valley View between 100 and Wooddale is pretty poor. And I think that is a city one. And I have seen mobility limited individuals struggling on that street. So I don't, you know, Andrew, you're not the snow plowing service, but I'm not sure what we can do to at least make it more consistent, or at least seek to address some of those areas where it is a little bit tougher.
Would actually be nice, Andrew, if you could bring maybe one of the supervisors of Public Works or whoever comes out and does that to just look at some of those stretches, because and I'm talking about only city maintained stretches, to take a look at those, because they have only just to walk on them to see how impassable they'd be for some people.
I can do that. Anything else, Lori?
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Stefan?
No comment except that I want to congratulate the new chair or new vice chair and the re-election of the new chair. And that's about it.
Kirk?
No comments. Thank you for a great group, and looks like this is one of the foreshadows of a great year of not working until 9 or after PM, because we're on track, depending on how much Andrew says. So thank you, everybody.
Just have a few things. I'll also echo the thanks to Kirk and Jill for their work as chair and vice chair. I probably I shouldn't say more than anybody, but I know a lot of communication and meetings over the year on these various work plan initiatives and topics. So I appreciate, and the city appreciates, the time and effort that you've put into your service in the commission. And I'm looking through and I'm realizing that almost half of you I've worked with in a leadership position at some point during my time as your liaison. So and every time it's been great. So I just commend all of you for being great leaders in your community and in your field. And I look forward to working with Kirk again and working with Andy more in the coming year. Moving on to my updates. as part of MnDOT's their noise abatement program, we're going to get a new sound wall on McCully Trail between Valley View and Indian Way West. Through this program, MnDOT covers 90% of the costs, and the other 10% is assessed to the benefiting properties. The project will replace an existing chain link fence along that section of 169 with a 20-foot tall wooden wall. Construction is expected to begin this summer or fall. The city is preparing 3 funding applications for Met Council's regional solicitation. One application is for roadway modernization on Vernon Avenue between Villa Way and Interlochen Boulevard. We're looking at potentially doing some lane reconfiguration there to get more ped and bike facilities along that corridor leading up into Grandview. We're also looking at an application for the diverging diamond interchange on Vernon over Highway 100 that was recommended in the East Grandview Transportation Plan. And then the third application is for an ADA compliant pedestrian bridge to replace the Roslyn pedestrian bridge, which is closed right now. So the funding cycle for this round is for 2026 and 2027. So there's still a lot of work to go through those, but keeping our fingers crossed that one or more of those projects could get selected for funding.
So, and
The question on that,
Roslyn
if
Bridge,
that,
sorry, whoever was
Laura,
talking.
you might have the same question I do. Mine was just, does that mean the Roslyn Bridge is closed until 26, 27?
Exactly.
No, I'm sorry. I don't have any updates on the closure for the Roslyn Ped Bridge. I'm optimistic. I'm hoping that it won't be closed until then. I'm just saying that we are applying for a grant to replace that bridge with an ADA compliant one. And that grant is only for projects that will be constructed in 26, 27. So if we get that grant, then we wouldn't be able to reconstruct the bridge until 2026 at the earliest. But that doesn't mean that the bridge is going to be closed until then. I don't know that yet. We have our joint work session with City Council. It's currently scheduled for Wednesday, September 7th. We have an opportunity to move it up earlier in the year to Tuesday, March 1st, which would be the next council meeting. It'd be the 6 to 6:30 time slot. I just wanted to ask the commission if there's any interest to changing our work session to that time slot versus keeping it in September.
Maybe Lori could comment maybe as part of one of the larger work plans, what timing you think might serve you best.
I'm not, Jill, do you think we would be ready to go to a council work session to talk about trees? I mean, I'd be more interested in going to the work session and rehashing organized trash collection, which
Maybe we could just slip it in. No, you're talking about September then, right?
September. Yeah.
I think we'd be ready.
March 1st, next week or 2
Oh,
weeks.
I'm sorry, you cut out. March 1st, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Because Parks is just getting back to me, like texting as we're talking.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, it's unfortunate that the only 2 options are like now or in 8 months. But I don't think we're ready now. And, 8 months from now, maybe,
Right.
It may be that it's a different topic entirely, because I don't think we're going to be particularly controversial.
I think with what we learned too from last year and some of our retrospectives in December, you can initiate other discussion the way you want to help get your work planned and done and reviewed along the way. So maybe that means you and Jill want to do something in June or something with a smaller group. That might be possible that Andrew can help with.
Yeah. I kind of like the idea of hanging on to the September one, because that's our work plan development for the following year. So I kind of hate to let go of that timing.
Okay,
So it sounds like we'll leave
it in September.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you say the date again? I'm trying to put it on my calendar.
Sure. It is Wednesday, September 7th.
At 7 or 6 p.m. What time is it?
At I believe we have the first time slot, which would be
5:30?
5:30 to 6.
Thank you.
And then last update I have is that our next meeting is Thursday, March 24th at 6 o'clock, and it will be in person at Public Works. Note that the meeting is on for March is on the 4th Thursday instead of the 3rd Thursday, so that it doesn't conflict with Purim.
Nice. So March 24th?
24th. That's all I have.
Very good. Thank you, Andrew. So I'd like to call to adjourn the meeting. Would anybody like to make a motion?
I move that we adjourn.
Seconds.
Second.
Great. Roll call.
Commissioner Aller,
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Katui,
Aye.
Commissioner Lewis,
Aye.
Commissioner Plum-Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Richmond,
Aye.
Chair Johnson.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Great night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
See you next time.
Thank you.